I'm here today with Nicola Geretti. He is the co-founder and CEO of Super Bit Machine. Nicola, welcome to My Company Story.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about what Super Bit Machine is? What do you guys do? Tell us what the company is.
We make cross-platform multiplayer games. Myself and my co-founder, we founded the company in 2017 now. It's been 3 years. Doesn't feel that long. But basically, the whole premise for us is we wanted to make games that we love to play, but also games that you can pick up anywhere. You can pick it up on your phone or tablet or PC, and you can play cross-platform with your friends.
So can you tell us what's a game that the audience might have heard of?
So we just released actually a first game with this company. It's called Armajet. It's basically a real-time multiplayer shooter, but it's a platformer shooter is what we call it. It's similar to kind of like a Super Smash Brothers with guns, if you will.
Okay.
It's a little bit more of a easier entry to play, a little bit more accessible to something like a Call of Duty, for instance. But It still kind of gets you going as a shooter would.
Got it. So you guys, you built the game. You built the machine from scratch. I mean, this game from scratch, right? A platform multiplayer game.
Yeah.
How did you get into that? I mean, you're a fairly young guy. You've only done this for 3 years. What was your path leading you up to doing this?
So I started out as many kids would, just playing video games, right? It's been a big passion of mine since the 90s. I was born in 85. So right as I got into my teens, I started playing PC games, occasional console, but PC was really my go-to. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, I used to, when internet really became a thing, I started playing games online, like many folks do nowadays. And I, started getting good at a few of them, playing against real people online, namely Unreal Tournament and Quake, and ultimately started competing. So you play online and you hear about a competition. It's a few $100 here, a few $100 there, right? And then competition started to give out larger prizes in the thousands or even tens of thousands. So back in 2003, at the time I was still living in Italy. I was born and raised there. I had heard of a big competition called World Cyber Games, which was recruiting from every nation, and the nation would sponsor a group of players to go play the game, go to the finals in Korea. Back then was a really big deal, and really the only big international competition. So in 2003, I was able to go through the qualifier, win the nationals, and ultimately win the grand final in Korea. So
wow.
I was the world champion of that game, which was amazing. I mean,
that's fantastic.
I was 18, and I was just having an amazing time doing it.
So 18 years old, you win this grand prize in Korea. How much money was it, if I might ask?
Back then, for me, it was everything. It was $20,000.
That's huge for 18.
Pre-tax. I got my car. It was amazing. The best experience to me. And really, to me, what the gaming is still all about, especially competitive games nowadays that are called esports, it's really just a social activity. It's just being able to travel, meet people from all over the world. Ultimately, that's how I learned to speak English, right?
Yeah.
Just trying to figure out how to communicate with people everywhere. It was one of the best times of my life for sure.
Now, I got to ask you a question on this, because the stereotype gamer is a guy sitting in his parents' basement with his head up and not socializing at all, and yet you're saying it's a very social experience. Can tell me about that? What do you mean by that? That seems contrary to what I've always thought.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of people that are in the basement playing. I think internet really opened up for people, especially people that might not be. Might be a little bit more introvert, or just might not be in the classic sort of social sphere, if you will. And it really allows people to socialize in different ways. And what I really love about just gaming online in general is that, unlike traditional sports, it was international to begin with, right? You might be, pressing a button, joining and matchmaking, and start playing with someone, and this person may be from anywhere in the world, and it just, back then it was, it used to be a pen pal with someone from Australia, right, or something, right? That was the extent of what you could do. And that was exciting. But nowadays you can do it with the click of a button, and it's phenomenal, because then it's instant. You can chat, you can play with or against someone. It's really great. And so a lot of people have grown into that space, including myself. And what ultimately led me to be able to experience it's, again, leaving my country of origin, and ultimately just have such a more rich life experience in general, which I think that, I've been fortunate to be able to do that. It's not for everyone, but I think that just gaming in general allows you to do that, and I think that's wonderful.
That is wonderful. That's great. Congratulations. So take us from this journey. So you're this 18-year-old kid, and he wins this big $20,000. You go out and buy a fancy car. You go back home to Italy. You're still gaming. Take us from that spot to then starting your own company, with co-founding a company that you're doing that's a very successful company. I mean, take us. How did you get from the kid to the entrepreneur?
So so yeah, after I went back to Italy, you know, it was, obviously at the pinnacle of my gaming career. I had sponsors approach me, so then that allowed me to be able to travel without having to worry so much about expenses. Right now, I was competing in different tournaments, and I was able to do it in a pro, if you will, way, at least at the time. Later, around 2004, I met my 2005, excuse me. I met my who's now my wife in New York. She was actually promoting a documentary about professional gamers. And so, that's really where the two worlds collided. I was in New York on this competition. Was the biggest one at the time. I think, we had about $1 million worth in prizes and in cash, really, and an MTV broadcast. That was the first big televised event, and it was incredible. I did not win this competition, for the record, but I was in a runner up there at the finals, and it's really that's really the point where I told myself, listen, I've been doing this for 5 years. That's great, but also, gaming, especially professional gaming, has a relatively short lifespan for people that as they grow up. Right? I mean, athletes generally, or like people that do this, don't do it for too long.
Right.
So I looked at sort of my options, but most importantly, really, what changed it all, it's meeting the my wife at the time there, and I was really interested in a slightly different avenue. She was living in Los Angeles at the time. I had never visited, so I decided to go back to Italy. Then kind of a few weeks later, just go to LA, spend some time with her, and that's really where I ended up saying, okay, this is my place to be. And so, big change, of course, changing countries altogether. My intent at the time was, okay, how do I continue being a professional here in the States? At the time, gaming in Europe and in the US was very, very different, both culturally and what kinds of games were played, the competitive space. The tournaments were not as many. They were very different. So it was kind of a hard moment, because I had to kind of figure out a different way to really earn my living. At the time I was still a student. So
right. So you came to LA, and you're still making a living and buying groceries from gaming money, right? You're still gaming and getting and sponsorships like that. And then at some point, did it change then, and you decided to then make some games, or how did you shift into that?
So I had a background in electronics. And also, of course, I dabbled in a little bit in kind of web and online properties. And at the time, this was 2006 at this point. It was kind of the beginning of big social networks, right? I think MySpace was kind of around the corner. It was just about out. And Facebook was about to kind of like hit it big. And so, at the time I started building websites and actually social media sites back then. And so we had a kind of portfolio of clients, especially in LA. This is, again, this entertainment capital. So, I got a lot of work through that. And one interesting thing is, again, coming from online games, there was a little bit of a parallel with the things that I was studying and kind of implementing for clients, as well as what I remembered and what I knew from gaming. And so a little bit later, a couple of years later, after kind of doing a lot of work like that, I started dabbling into real-time networking solutions.
Okay.
How do you get one client to communicate with another client, and how you get them to do it very quickly over the network? And that's really what fuels a lot of games nowadays. If you play any kind of game online, and you move your character and you see the other guy move immediately in your screen, there's a lot that goes on under the hood, right?
Right.
That's very different from websites, which is what I was doing at the time. But I'd like to think that having the experience from a player kind of gave me a little bit of an advantage in trying to understand what's most important for the player, right? What kind of how do you implement something like that? And at the time, it still wasn't about gaming. That really only got started when I decided to venture out. At the time, I was doing my own thing, but I just really wanted a team. I wanted to learn from others, especially from the gaming space. And so there were a few folks from Electronic Arts that actually had split off from Electronic Arts and decided to build their own company, but they had no technical experience.
Oh.
The company at the time was called Buffalo Studios. This was now 2010.
Okay.
And kind of went in. There were only, I think, four of them at a time at the office, if that. And yeah, basically just they hired me almost on the spot, and that's really where it all started.
So you're with Buffalo Studios, and now you're with guys who are actually coding and programming and all that. Now you have a company that you're working within, and then now what's been the hardest challenge between Superbit Machine compared to Buffalo Studios?
Well, it was a different time, and the gaming space really, it moves very quickly. I think the challenges that we have now with Superbit, I mean, with any company, frankly, in this space, especially ours, which we specialize in real-time multiplayer games, it's really finding great talent. It's finding talent that is hungry for challenges that kind of haven't been solved in the space, and that's really what really focus on Superbit Machine in the early day. With Buffalo Studios, we also did real-time multiplayer, but we were, I think, fortunate enough that it was at a time where, especially in LA, we had a lot of interactive talent coming from companies nearby, even Disney, for instance, right? They were kind of spearheading that genre, especially social games or social online experiences. So at the time, it was a little bit of a different challenge. With Buffalo Studios, it was all about, how do you create a good product to market fit onto a new platform, which at the time was actually Facebook Games. So with Buffalo Studios, I was able to kind of create my own team there, tech talent, hire engineers for front end, for back end, to be able to create database systems and the engine to run it all. And it was phenomenal. I mean, we were very, again, it was right place, right time. We actually created it was a bingo product. It was an online bingo game. It wasn't gambling though. It's just how you would play in a game on Facebook nowadays, or even on mobile, to be honest with you. And yeah, it exploded. We never spent $1 in marketing, at least in the first year or two, and it just grew virally. Like a lot of like nowadays, you would get a hashtag on Twitter, for instance, blowing up, right? And so yeah, I mean, 2 years in, we actually started getting some requests for acquisition, some M&A offers. And at the time, I think there were maybe about 120, 140 of us. So picture a company going from 4 to 140. I mean, at about 30 or 40, you start losing track of who you're hiring and everyone's names. So it's a big cultural shift in a very short amount of time. And that was probably one of the things that I learned a lot from, because, in retrospect, it was good that we scaled that quickly because we needed to bolster the marketing side, especially. But also culturally, we kind of were, we were just fostering really primarily one game, which was Bingo Blitz. So we did a lot with it.
How did you exit Buffalo Studios and then start Superbit Machine? Tell us about that transition.
So we ultimately got acquired by Caesars, the casino company. And I was there, ultimately stayed there for a couple of years to learn more from corporate life, frankly, to see how things were done at a larger scale and learn from that. And I even dabbled a little bit on the product side, and just to understand best how to design something because this is now a game that is running for 3-4 years, live ops, which at the time was very unusual.
So you sold the business, Buffalo Studios, to Caesars. Caesars buys it. They keep you on as an employee, I take it, or as a key man to stay and run the place. But you're free to go. You're free to do what you want after that then, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, anytime there's an acquisition event, there's an earn-out period. So I stayed there for that. Ultimately, we were given some targets. We far exceeded those targets, which means that then the earn-out was that much better. And then ultimately, that success we had in those last couple of years allowed myself and my co-founder, frankly, to be able to take some time off.
Got it. So you and your co-founder you're both at Buffalo Studios, take time off, and then start up with Superbit Machine. And did it start with an idea with a game that wasn't out there yet that you wanted to come up with, and then you started building the team after that then?
Yeah, look, I'm extremely proud of what we did at Buffalo Studios, but Bingo isn't exactly a game that I would see myself playing.
Okay.
And honestly, the fact that we're able to do so much in a genre that we were not familiar with, I think it speaks to the fact that it was a good product, a good game. But yes, we wanted to make games that we really love to play, because we wanted to think that being able to, especially a game that's competitive, which is really my background, would allow us to really excel in a space that we found that was really underrepresented. And so
So take us in the future now. Then with Super Bit Machine, you've been in 3 years doing this, and now go through. I know it's a fast moving industry, but go 3 years in the future now. Where do you see the industry going? What trends do you see happening in this gaming space?
Well, there's a few. I mean, we just kind of we just kind of went from there's a lot of VR in the last few years. A lot of companies that have raised a lot of money in VR. Ultimately, VR is still a niche kind of product. We see the main issue is just the cost of hardware and cost of entry. A lot of companies have done a lot to kind of ease into it, such as PlayStation. I think in the next few years, I mean, even this year, I think we're going to see a lot more announcements. We're going to see a lot of AR. Now, AR attached, applied to gaming may not have a sort of big product fit just yet, but I think we're going to see a lot of mobile effort towards AR this year, whether it's with games or something else. And then ultimately, we've seen some announcements from last year. Cloud gaming is becoming more and more interesting. I think right now there's maybe an issue with image, the way it's portraying, but essentially it's cloud gaming is the way it's at least introduced nowadays, is being able to play anything anywhere without having actually to download the game, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Google with Stadia is kind of the forerunner of that. And so, right now we're still, the product is launched, but I still think we can consider it an early beta. I think maybe by in the next year, as they invest in more studios and invest in more exclusives, I think we're going to see a lot more interest from customers, maybe more about in 2021. But I think we're going to see we're going to find ourselves in a place where I can play any game of any size, really, even really high AAA kind of quality games on my phone and then on my PC and on my console. It doesn't really matter where you play it.
Wow.
That's partly what we're doing as a studio ourselves is, although not cloud gaming in the traditional sense, we're creating experiences you can pick up on a phone and play on a PC as well, and kind of bring your progress so you can play in real time with folks that are on one platform or another. And I think we're going to see more of that.
Oh, that's tremendous. And you're positioning your company to be in the forefront and leading that, riding that wave in the future then, I take it.
I'd like to say that we have an amazing team here that has, really, had a deep dive in that experience of what it means. I mean, it certainly has had its share of challenges, right? How do you get a game that's fair to play on PC versus someone on the phone that uses fingers as opposed to, uses touch as opposed to keyboard and mouse, right?
Right.
So it's not for all products, but I'd like to say that we've kind of we nail that in some sense. But again, the more we develop on it, the more we release stuff on it, the more we have to be careful about creating that sort of balance, especially for a competitive game.
That's great, Nicola. Now, let me ask you, I ask everyone coming on the show what challenges you've faced and how you've overcome them. And you've had, especially, I'd like to dwell into, if you want to, in the two businesses that you've had, what would you compare you've done better or worse between Buffalo Studios and Super Bit Machine? What challenges did you face, and then how did you overcome those in comparing those two companies?
I think, I can start with the Super Bit Machine one. I think, I mentioned that it's hard to find good talent. Not that it's not out there, but it's hard to find a good team that you can grow and you can scale and you can kind of, really push a lot of good, positive leadership on and get people engaged as much as possible. I think, with Superbit, I think we were there now, but I wish we had done that a little bit sooner. I think that
the challenge was finding and recruiting and bringing that great talent in that you have now.
As well as, again, if you're doing something that's been done before, I think it's easy to say, hey, look at them. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And they give a great example to follow, right? If that's an example you're kind of modeling yourself after. But if you're trying to do something new, you have to be really good at instilling, good culture, but also create a great mission and a great, frankly, a mission statement, if you will, for people to understand and follow. And ultimately, you won't have to micromanage as much as I've had to do for a while, because people will just do what you've outlined in the mission statement in so many words. So
yeah, that's great advice. So really what you're talking about is as a CEO and the leader of the company, creating the vision and the mission statement for everyone to get behind and follow, make it articulate enough and clear enough that new employees, even though you can't point to we're going to do it like Disney, you can't do that because you're not doing it like anybody right now. You're doing it custom to your own, right?
Yeah, look, and it's not as easy as just printing something out and putting it on a wall, right? That becomes people tend to get very cynical about that, and that's not what we do here, right? It has to be pushed with very clear examples, with just, it's a process I'm still learning, right? I mean, leadership is certainly isn't something you can learn from books. So
No.
it's that's that's something that I'm still kind of dealing with. And on the Buffalo Studio side, I think that the bigger challenge I think was, yes, how do you get a company from 6 people to 100 plus in a couple of years without, or at least evolving what you should be doing as a studio. So at the time, we started out kind of as a gaming studio, right? We're all about let's do something creative, let's do something amazing. We were there just like Superbit to develop, distribute, and market what we have. So we have complete control over our product from end to end. But later on, once we've acquired and grew a lot more on the marketing side, we became more of a marketing machine, which was really amazing, actually. I mean, that was the right thing to do because it's ultimately we got acquired and we really maximized the return. But one of the things that I wanted to see there was really how do we create more games? How do we use our brand to define us, to create customer loyalty and create more of an experience that people expect when it's attached to the name, say, Buffalo Studios. And again, it's I think culturally was a little bit different, and it's ultimately why I decided that my time there was over, and that's what I'm trying to really accomplish here at Superbit.
I see. So you had a great run with Buffalo Studios, and now you're trying to recreate that and get that same culture back now, and from the lessons you learned at that experience, now taking them and applying them to where you are right now.
That's accurate.
That's fantastic. That's great. Before we wrap up here, Nicola, any bits of advice that you would want to pass on to a young 18-year-old who just won a super tournament somewhere and is thinking about their life, career, and where they want to go? Any bits of advice you'd want to pass on to someone coming up the road?
I think think long and hard about what you really want to do, what would really make you happy. I mean, I never thought of myself as a company leader or even wanting to have, frankly, I just never thought of myself as an entrepreneur even. I think what drives me forward outside, of course, I have a background as an engineer, so innovation and interesting problems to solve are obviously always driving me. But as a CEO of a company, it's not just that, right? It's a lot about making sure that we have a team that grows organically, that works well together, has a good culture, and frankly that have a really good reason to come to work. I mean, recently we've outlined a series of changes to actually get people to think about what how they see themselves as individuals, whether it's serving the company or not, in a few months, and really trying to accomplish those goals. And we as a company, we help them do that, and ultimately even in the first few months of implementing that, it's already manifested itself in higher productivity, and people are happier to come to work, even though it wasn't really aimed at helping the business. And so that really makes me happy. The fact that we can get, sure, we have, almost 27 employees, but the fact that we have such a good, healthy base that then these folks are going to be the ones, to some extent leading the people that we hire after them.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a good way to organically grow a team. Certainly not from 6 to 100 in 2 years, because we're not there yet. But I like to think that we're quality over quantity.
That's fantastic, and that's really great advice. I think that's a good place to leave it on this. But before we do end, if anyone listening to this wants to get a hold of you, Nicola, what's the best way to do that?
Well, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm on Twitter as well. Just you can search my name, Nicola Geretti. And yeah, hey, you can always download the game. You can find me in the game with the Geretti tag, so I can always find you there.
I love it. That's a great idea. All right, Nicola, thanks very much. It's been great talking to you today, and best of luck, and we'll follow your success. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to My Company Story. We have new episodes coming out every week, so please subscribe if you like this. And if you'd like to hear previous episodes, you can go to mycompanystory.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, if you or someone you know would be interested in coming on the show, please email me at don@burge.com. Thanks for listening.